Everyone, my name is ESV Diamond, and today I am here to teach you about the Level 2 Invade every League of Legends player needs to know. This is an Invade I use in my solo queue games almost every single time and have near 80% success rate with. Worst case scenario, you'll set the enemy jungler really far behind while giving yourself a nice advantage to cruise through the early levels with. This is my first video, so feel free to leave any constructive criticism in the comments below. Now the first question is, what is this and who should I do it with? And the answer is, this Invade works on almost everybody. What we are going to use for this is the power that the buff camp will provide against the enemy level 2, combined with the element of surprise to set the enemy jungler behind. This, like I said, this works on almost any jungler. Particularly good on Lee Sin and Shyvana, but also works on different ones like Kha'Zix and Evelynn. Basically any champion with the ability to fight early levels. Although Kha'Zix and Evelynn both have to start blue to do this, it works either way. You're going to use a lot of surprise here. So right here the Warwick has made a terrible mistake that he doesn't even realize likely is a terrible mistake. One of the hardest things you need to figure out when trying to do this invade is which buff to invade. Although in some clear-cut cases, it's always red buff or always blue buff. In this case, it could be either. While Warwick is pretty mana dependent, with a good leash from bottom lane, he could start red and very easily just use his Hunter's Call to clear the jungle for low mana. So now that I know there's a couple things about this ward. Not only do I know where Warwick's starting for free, I also know this ward is not going to be back up in time for this invade. When doing this, it basically is not dependent on a good leash, it's not dependent on starting a certain side. Just this is a timing based invade. You're going to use a hole in current jungle timings to exploit the enemy and set them behind. I'm going to start red here as Shyvana because I would like the slow and the damage over time aspect when I do this invade. So here Riven gives me a really good leash, but even if she gave me a lesser leash, this would still work. Always smite the first buff, as the timing for this invade will put it back up by the time you get to the second buff. As you see here, I'm beelining right for the red buff and pinging the map, letting my allies know I'm coming. Now I mentioned this as a timing-based invade, and the timing we're exploiting is the fact that most junglers will do a second camp before their second buff, allowing their smite to come up. I am going to get set up and in position while the enemy is doing that. As you can see, Warwick is just finishing up his second camp, and I am now in position. There's a couple things about setting this invade up as the attacker, and the first and foremost being have a ward that sees both the enemy's buff as well as in the bush. So that way if they pull the buff back, you still have vision of it, but if they fail to pull it, you'll have vision of it either way. The second thing is your positioning. I found very early on that this little minion has some really weird aggro and will sometimes pick up enemies that aren't necessarily the closest to it. Particularly if you stand near this sign or right here in the bush, you're likely to pull aggro from this minion. So here I am, I'm waiting. Now I am losing some time here, but it's going to be worth it because I'm going to set this Warwick really far behind. Here he comes, and I'm going to start pinging and letting my team know. I want my Yasuo to collapse, so I'm going to make sure my allies are aware I'm doing this. I also let them know in chat. So when the buff gets low, but still out of smite range, you see here is 550, and both our smites, let's see, right now, smite should be doing 410 damage. I want to start this before. If I wait too long, they can easily smite it, or it comes to a smite war where we both do even damage. So I'm going to come in early, I'm going to throw my E, walk up and smite this, and Warwick just knows he's done here. He's stuck, I have a red buff, Yasuo's collapsing, we got the first blood. And also a nice side effect of this is like this Katarina, often people collapse late and end up putting themselves even further behind. This Katarina blue flash, lost a good chunk of her health, all for basically nothing. Now not only am I ahead, not only is Warwick behind, Katarina is behind as well with our Yasuo in the lead. It's a very simple invade, and there's not a whole lot to it, but again, you're going to use this timing window. Note that if you play some junglers like Elise that have very fast clear speeds, particularly with the execute on her Q, you can just start the opposite buff, say the blue buff in this scenario, and immediately beeline to red, use your ward to gain vision, and aggro it from over the wall and take it. However, I tend to go for the more aggressive opening, as you have a high chance of killing your opponent, as well as stealing their buff and setting them behind. I hope this helps some people, because almost every solo queue game I see, this never gets warded out properly. It works way too often. Even on junglers, it probably shouldn't. One thing to note if you are playing against this, there are several ways to defend. The most obvious is the mid laner using their trinket to ward this buff. However, or ward this spot for the route to the buff. However, most mid laners will either place the ward too late or too early, such as his Katarina did, and find themselves not getting the vision when it's needed. So now I have 3 of the 4 initial buffs on the map, as well as first blood. I'm going to be in a very good position for this game. One other trick if you are possibly defending against this, or what every jungler should do, is not only use your trinket ward to go over the wall and ward this bush, giving vision in this whole area, but pull the buff into the bush. If you do both things, there will be no good route into your red buff that the enemy won't be seen. And if you see the enemy in advance, you can simply just collapse on them. I hope this helps some players, and again, this is my first video, so feel free to leave me any constructive criticism. And sorry for any quality or sound issues. I will be working on those as I do future ones. Have a good day, and have a good time on the fields of justice.